Hello, everybody. Hi. Good evening. Thanks for tuning in on a U.S. holiday. I appreciate y'all. Oh my goodness. Someone really wants attention and kisses today. How are y'all doing? Where are you tuning in from? Hi, Kelly. Thank you for the likes. Where are y'all tuning in from? Let me know. Drop it in the comments. Ooh, goodness. Someone is feisty today. Hi, Muffet. Hello, hello. Let me pour myself a little tea. I think my tea is cool enough now. Yeah. Brooklyn. Nice. I love me some Brooklyn. I go to Brooklyn very often. One of my favorite places in the world. Hi, Luna. Good to have you. Y'all, we're going to be talking about how to love someone with an insecure attachment. Definitely one of my favorite topics to talk about. One that I like to nerd about. Leo, every time on live, every time. Leo loves to steal the show. Hey, Leo. What's up, buddy? Does not care. Marilyn, hey. Me and my girlfriend. Oh, I love that, Elba. Look at that. Tuning in with your partner. Wonderful. So that makes me really happy because I think that what I'm going to offer today is hopefully going to be helpful for you both, helpful for anybody that is hoping to just understand the concept of attachment styles, but also understand the ways in which to implement that knowledge within your relationships. Hey, Leo, come on, come on. Can't beat him, join him, huh? Alrighty. So, yes. So, is anyone drinking tea with me this evening? If you're drinking tea, let me know. Oh, let me know. And my tea tonight is by Dwell Tea and Company. And this tea is an immunity tea. So it has elderberries and other blends that offers some immunity, just kind of getting ahead of the season. So this is not sponsored. I just love tea and I love to plug tea companies that are like just creating amazing blends. So that's that. But let me know if you're drinking any tea and what kind of tea. Hey, from Canada. Hi, Sean. Yeah, y'all. So I've got a jam-packed schedule of things to cover with y'all. So I'm going to jump right in because I want to make sure that I cover everything. And of course, I only have 45 minutes with y'all because this is for 45-minute tea session. So yes, black tea with honey as per usual. Yes. Cold because it is hot out. So I feel that. So what I'm going to be covering is, just so that you know a bit of the agenda, I'm going to be covering attachment styles and what they are, really kind of where they come from, how they get hardwired, the ways that they show up within our relationships, and how to then integrate that knowledge into how you approach a partner that presents with an insecure attachment style, even if you yourself have a version of an insecure attachment style, but just so that you can understand how to approach a partner. And this can also be the kind of knowledge that you can acquire for yourself so that you can then communicate to others who want to be in partnership with you how you would appreciate that they show up in their relationship with you so that you can feel like you're feeling as secure as you possibly can be within the relationship. I hope that makes sense and it feels like a good agenda to cover. And let's dive right in. So, typically, when people are hoping to know more about attachment styles, they're learning about attachment styles because something has happened. There's an infraction, right? And usually, what tends to happen is that they suffered a breakup or they're seeing repeating patterns in their love life and they're like, I'm getting curious about this. I'm wondering The typical language is, what's wrong with me? Or I'm wondering why I'm getting into these repetitive patterns in relationships. And that tends to be the general, like, internal language. So they start feeling pretty overwhelmed, and they start feeling like they have some failures in their relationships. And as a result, they start getting pretty inquisitive about what it is that's contributing to that. That tends to be a lot of the norm, right? Like, people just get curious about their own journey in relationships, and they want to do something about it. And um, so just water, Danny, I see that. And so, yeah. So just to take us a little bit back, for anybody who is like a history buff or somebody who is a total like psych nerd like myself, to understand the ways that attachment patterns get hardwired within us, we have to go back to the origins of who we are. And typically, those origins start with our caregivers, whoever it was that was in place in our lives that created for us the primary relationships that we've had in life. Those are the individuals that are typically most, let's call them, responsible for how we attached. And more often than not, it's parents. So we give parents a little bit of credit in that regard because that's our primary place of attachment. For some people, it's grandparents. For some people, there's other people in the mix. Some people live in multi-generational homes. Some people have been fostered into homes. Some people have been adopted into homes. And so whatever constellation of that primary relationship experience it is that you have, all of that counts, right? And typically, what a child is seeking when they're in their primary stages of learning how to relate with others is that they're seeking for, one, attunement, meaning emotional attunement to a person that's a caregiver, a person that's an adult in their lives. And two, they're looking for safety. So they're looking for some sense that the world is okay and that they can just exist. And let's like add a third, actually. They're looking for nurturance. So they're looking to be nurtured and to be cared for so that they can be soothed. So all of those three things are really essential components in helping a baby to feel, okay, I can be okay. I am okay. The world is okay. This relationship is okay. There's no disruption in safety and love and connection. And I can securely attach. This person, this is the narrative of like what happens in those primary years. This person can be trusted. They're dependable. Every time I cry, they're there. Every time that I need something or have baby feelings, they're there. And so in all of that, we start developing a secure attachment base. When any of that is disrupted, if it's disrupted because of a multitude of things, a parent has a preoccupation with their own emotional experience. Maybe there's like trauma, maybe there is um, some sort of turbulence in the home, maybe the parent overworks. If there is anything that disrupts a parent's capacity to be attuned to their child and their capacity to be present enough to create that secure attachment, then what is likely to happen is that the child insecurely attaches. And that, as we know, then creates the foundation for a person having an insecure attachment pattern that they then carry into their lives. But let me get into the history because I totally bypassed that. So I was mentioning in a live on TikTok today how my first paper when I was in my master's program, prior to even like transitioning into my doctorate, I had to take a master's for 2 years. And in that master's, my very first paper was on attachment styles. And I had to do a bit of a history synopsis on the first scientist, the neuroscientist that actually like created attachment styles as an area of study within the realm of psychology. And his name was John Bowlby. And John Bowlby kind of like just helped us understand, okay, this is the setup for attachment styles, but then came like this other person, Mary Ainsworth, and Mary Ainsworth like did all these studies with babies and their mothers. And the study was called The Strange Situation, where the babies were actually taken away from their mothers, and the babies were studied to see how the baby responded when the mother left out of a room and came back. And depending on how the baby attached to the mother when the mother came back, like if the baby didn't want anything to do with the mother, that established like an avoidant attachment style. If the baby got really like stressed, like the baby was crying and inconsolable, then we decided that as a field that was the premise for like disorganized attachment. And if the baby was a little bit like kind of like hoping for the mother, like reaching out for her, then that almost kind of like was the setup for more of an anxious attachment style. So we started seeing really kind of in vivo how babies attach or detach from a primary caretaker or caregiver when they exit their lives and when they come back. Now, this was a very like short period of separation, about a few minutes, but it was significant enough for the babies to actually respond in the ways that they were already developing their attachment styles. So that's I'll leave I'll leave the nerdy stuff out for now, because I can get into like what that looked like and the different ways in which that's informed how we understand attachment styles. And it's important, but I don't think it's fully the context of what I want to cover here today. So um, after we have that hard wiring, then so I'm glad it's helpful. Thanks, June. That's helpful to know. And thank you for the love from Chicago and Australia. Hello. Nice. So, yeah, there is a series of attachment styles that have been determined to be like the attachment styles that we've held on to since the 50s. So we have about 70 years of us saying, okay, these are kind of it. Nobody's really kind of developed any others. And one important thing to understand, and I think this is important for people that are in partnership to also understand about attachment styles, is that they have a function. They do offer a survival strategy inside of relationships. So it's not that if a person presents with an insecure attachment that it's all bad per se, right? Sometimes what it is informative. It allows us to understand, okay, this is how a person, how they're set up temperamentally to operate within relationships. And that allows them to feel like this is how they need to function, right? So it's almost like it allows you an eye into their world. And that's not to say that it can't be changed. We want for people to feel secure in their attachments to others, but it is an opportunity for you to establish greater intimacy with your partner if you see that they're insecurely attached, and you can see it from a more positive mindset, because I think that sometimes we see this as fairly negative, and I don't want that for us. Hi from Canada. Y'all are really all over the world up in here. I really appreciate that. So okay, so let's talk about the actual attachment styles themselves, because I think that this is for us to be able to understand attachment styles in reference to how we can approach them in relationship. Many of us need to understand what they are, because for the most part, a lot of people don't really know the full context of what each attachment style actually is or how it shows up. So we have, of course, secure attachment. And secure attachment is the attachment style that, as I mentioned, like a person feels like they can trust, they can depend upon others, they can feel a level of intimacy that doesn't feel frightening. They feel like they oftentimes feel a sense of security in themselves and in others. So there's like that duality. And that's an important piece that I think is important to understand in the framework of like secure attachment. So that's that. And there's so much else to say. I mean, I think maybe more than what a live permits, but there's a lot to say about securely attached individuals and how typically one might say like they tend to suffer maybe a little bit less in relationships because they don't have a lot of those other preoccupations that are present in the insecure attachment styles. So speaking of preoccupation, the first insecure attachment style that I always like to cover is anxious attachment. And hey from the Bronx. Hey, Linda. Thank you for the question. I'm going to answer questions right in like a couple minutes. So I'll get to that right now. But for anxious attachment styles, people typically tend to feel a great threat is coming and is going to create some sense of abandonment. Typically, what feels like is priority or what the person needs when they're anxiously attached is that they need safety and they need security and validation because there is a perceived lack of investment from the other person. And this happens in friendships too. Let me just like throw that out there, and in family relationships. Like if you believe that the person isn't as invested or as into the relationship, or even if that's like something that you've created in your mind because that's just how you see relationships, that's more often than not a representation of an anxious attachment. And it creates a lot of suffering because that person is, as the attachment style says, fairly anxious or preoccupied with the idea that there is a possibility that they don't have a partner that meets them 50-50 or a partner that is willing to stay the course of the relationship. What happens more often than not? That people do a lot of self-fulfilling prophecies around this attachment style. They may self-sabotage, they may like do a bunch of things that disintegrate the relationship. All the while, that is literally their biggest fear. So that's the unfortunate part of like how our minds work, that sometimes the very things that we fear are the things that we create, right? And so there's that. So fear of abandonment, very big when it comes to anxious attachment. Fear that a person isn't invested in the relationship, huge when it comes to anxious attachment. And the constant preoccupation that your partner may leave, may not be responsive, may not love you as much as you love them, all of those things, that there isn't the 50-50, right? Whatever that may mean, right? And what tends to happen as far as a behavior from this individual is that they're often seeking some sort of validation or approval. Like, do you love me? Are you really here? Do you really want this? Like a lot of that tends to be like the general language around anxious attachment. Then you have avoidant, also known as dismissive. And part of the reason why it's called dismissive is because it really literally looks like that. At an extreme, I like, to kind of like contextualize avoidant attachment with people, especially in this day and age, by like framing, by like, like it's an extreme example, but like thinking of like ghosting, for example. Like if you've ever been ghosted by anybody, even a friend, anyone, how does it feel to be ghosted, right? Like there's that. That's usually how at an extreme it can feel to kind of be in relationship with someone that's avoidantly attached. However, there's so much more that's there, so much more in the picture when it comes to avoidant attachment. Typically, when a person is avoidantly attached, they're really struggling with intimacy. And what I mean by that is that a person is experiencing that the intimacy as being almost like it feels really scary. It feels as if they're going to lose their independence. It feels as if they are going to have to depend on someone for all kinds of things. And it creates in them an avoidance of emotional intimacy so that they don't lose that independence that is so critical to the fabric of who they are. Many times when a person presents as avoidant, it tends to be because they had parents that were not very dependable. So if you have a parent whom you can't depend to be there, like there's one client that I used to have who had a parent that would sometimes pick her up from her mother's house and sometimes wouldn't. And she just wouldn't know when this person would show up. So that kind of experience where you just don't know if you can depend on someone leads a person to be hyper independent, to be very much a loner sometimes, right? Like they're known as like the lone wolves, or like they present as very strong and sturdy, self sufficient, like all those things, right? But at an emotional level, what is really underneath is this deep fear of having to rely upon someone and then be left with the level of disappointment that they experienced early on in life. So it's very complex, like I mentioned, right? So the behaviors may be that a person might be like, if they experience emotional intimacy with you, they, like, for example, like if they confide in you and they say, like, um, I am afraid of, something that's happening at work and it's causing me a lot of stress. That experience, that like them actually relaying that, means that they have a level of emotional intimacy with you that is it growing deeper in the connection. And when that happens, if they grow deeper in their connection with you, they need to have a moment where they need to back up in order to just like feel their emotions, because it can be very scary to have that level of connection. I hope that makes sense. But I think y'all get it. If you do get it, like show me a like or something. Like, yeah, I'm on the right track, or like that feels like a good example. I can also offer another one. Um, so preoccupied, anxious here, Luna. I guess you already know your attachment style, and it's wonderful. And I definitely recommend for anybody to know their attachment style. I get it. Yep. Thank you. Thank you. Makes sense. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so I got you. Thank you, y'all. I appreciate you. Okay, so that's more of like the avoidance type, but then we have a combination, and again, this person tends to suffer, but does present a certain way that can be a little bit, um, that I think in a relationship it can be, as we call it, like in therapy, like destructive, like relationship destroying is what we call it. So a person can be disorganized, fearful, avoidant. So it's basically the same thing. So fearful avoidant is something that we call like this attachment style, but we also call it disorganized. And we call it disorganized typically because in a person's primary years, there tended to be a lot of chaos. And that chaos created in this person an inability to attach in any which way. And so they basically take on the two insecure attachment styles together, both avoidant and anxious. So they're both. It's also called like anxious avoidant, or fearful avoidant, anxious avoidant, or disorganized. And what that means is that at times they're going to be a bit more distant when they experience emotional intimacy. And at times they're going to be like, oh no, this person is leaving. And they're going to be so fearful of that. However, because they're always kind of in between the two, it creates a level of lack of stability in relationships that then deepens their wound, right? And so, and then it's almost like, yet again, that self fulfilling prophecy, like relationships leave when I become intimate. And so, there's just all of that happening. For individuals that are in this attachment style, typically what tends to happen is that they have a deep desire for intimacy and a deep fear for it. So there's always like this push and pull that's happening with individuals in this category. It's very painful to be a person that's in this space where you're insecurely attached. So if you're a person that's watching on behalf of your partner, like wanting to know, well, how can I show up better for this person? I think in part it can be helpful to know what the underlying experiences are of individuals that present with any of these kinds of attachment styles, and then um, understanding also like that they need a bit of compassion in order to feel just a little bit more secure. And if that is you, like you're the individual that you're like viewing this for, I know I would view it for myself too. Um, then I deeply honor the fact that you would want to know more about your own attachment style. And also, I think it's helpful to learn about our own attachment style so that we can then, when we're in partnership with anybody, anyone at all, we can say, hey, listen, I learned this about me. And I think that it's important for you to know really what's underneath. And then we can work from there. Totally, indeed, definitely push and pull. Yeah, it's because if you come from an environment where push and pull was the norm, then that's going to be what you're going to know how to replicate, right? And it's very subconscious. So I want people to know that a lot of these experiences tend to be subconscious for the individual, and that they're not really aware of the push and pull. They're not aware that they're disengaging in order to self-protect because feeling dependent upon somebody else in an emotional way doesn't feel good to them. They don't know that they're like being um, maybe overemphasizing how much a person would actually leave and then actually creating the self-fulfilling prophecy. They're not entirely aware of that, which is why I love videos and chats like this, because they're educational and allow us to know a lot of the mechanisms of what's happening underneath in our minds, and it can give us an opportunity to do something a little bit differently tomorrow, the next day, right? That's so real. So how can you know your attachment styles? I'm going to get to that because I love that question, actually, June. So I'm going to get to that in a second. But what I do want us to get into a bit more is like how to love upon someone who's insecurely attached. But I'm also going to create a video of my favorite book on this topic, which I'm hoping to publish at some point this week, depending on my capacity. But there are attachment style quizzes that are out there. However, to be honest, I really love getting into like deep text, like people that have done the research and the work and are typically like, somewhere in the mental health sphere, that understand these attachment styles very deeply. And although I'm going to jump around a little bit because I really wanted to say this at the end, but my favorite book on this topic is called Attached. And it's by Amir Levine and Rachel Heller. Amazing book. So like enlightening. I think it's going to offer you a lot of introspection, and it's going to offer you an opportunity to really understand your own attachment style in a deeper way. So my inclination would be to get into a deep dive text like that rather than maybe like a quiz that's out there in the ether of the world that some like person created so that they can maybe get you into like a newsletter or something. We're all guilty of it, but I think I like the deeper dives better. So that book is amazing. Okay, Luna, so you know of the book. That book is everything, y'all. I read that book for the first time maybe like 12 years ago when it first came out. And oh goodness, like I recommend it all the time. When I still have my therapy practice, I would recommend it all the time to clients. I would take pieces of that book and utilize them in the context of helping people heal in their relationships, couples. Like it's such a good book. So I definitely deeply, deeply love it. And I definitely recommend it. And I'm not, of course, I mentioned there's no sponsorship. So it's just me telling you like the book that I love. And oh, thank you. So I have the best team. So it's linked on here as well if anybody wants to check it out. So let's get into this love piece because I've got about 15 minutes with you and I want to answer your questions. So loving upon someone that is insecurely attached first means that one, you validate the ways that they are attached. People that have an insecure attachment sometimes experience a bit of shame around that attachment. And it's really helpful to never shame a person for how they've attached and what the origin stories of who they are have been and how that's contributed to how they show up in relationships. I think that if I can offer anything that is like the single most important thing, it would be that love upon a person without shaming them. And that already creates the baseline for a healthy, secure connection with an individual. And I would also say that if you're the person relaying that message to another person, say that to them. This is the way that I attached. I have learned that attaching this way can come with some sentiments of shame. And I want to highlight that in this relationship just so that you know, and so that we don't get into the territory of creating shame for me or for you around attachment styles. So, super important, right? When you get past that initial stage of, getting past the shame and then indulging in the what can be done, how can love still be prominent here? I would urge like anybody that's coupled or looking to be coupled to look to co-create happiness by creating it with with a lot of curiosity about the other person. It's important to be curious about them, be curious about yourself, because I like everything that I highlighted right now about attachment styles is generally how people tend to be within their own respective attachment styles. But you're like a total like unique human, and so are they. So it would be really important for you to get curious about, well, how does this anxious attachment show up in my life? What does it look like for me? What is it that I do whenever I'm feeling like the fearfulness feels really prominent? What are my behaviors whenever I'm trying to avoid abandonment from my significant other? It's really important to get into that curious mindset about yourself and about your partner so that you can know, okay, this is the way that I flow, this is the way that they flow within their respective attachment styles. Um, I will say having a partner that is mutually invested in the process of not only curiosity, but relational growth is really critical in this journey, because if you have someone that isn't coming in with that curiosity or doesn't want to seek stability and security with you, then it's going to be really hard to knock out shame, understand your individual patterns, work out a way to make things work within your respective styles, right? And then, hopefully like the goal for everybody is to like eventually feel more secure. And even if you're inching like just a little bit more towards secure attachment, that you can feel that in your relationships, regardless of what attachment style you may come in with. So that's my 2 cents on that. It was more like 3 cents or 10 cents. But if it's resonating, let me know. Um, because I think that those foundational things are really important to highlight before we get into like the specifics. But so for people that are in the like anxious avoidant, right? Like the pairing, the disorganized, fearful avoidant, so many names for it. It's going to be really important that you show this individual that you are devoted to preserve the relationship. So, brainstorming on how to effectively do that can be really helpful because that already shows devotion. Like, if you're sitting down with someone and you're brainstorming on how you can make the relationship flourish, that already is a devoted conversation. So, that's one thing. Also, having some sort of balance, because remember that this person is an individual that's coming in with that need for independence and need for aloneness and all of those things that have been like structured into their personality because of their attachment style, the avoidant piece especially. And they're also going to need moments when they're feeling deeply connected and secure and validated in the relationship because they have that anxious element. So having open dialogue about either can be so helpful to tie any loose ends regardless of where the person is veering. If they're pushing and if they're pulling, You can even use that language. Like, I feel a bit more of a pull coming from you today. And I'd like to just emphasize that. And I'd like to know what you need in reference to that. And the same goes for utilizing that language as a way to model for your partner what you need. Like, if you're using that language, they're going to register, okay, that's the language we use. And when that's the case, they're going to hopefully, should they be devoted enough, right, to the relational growth, they're going to use that language. For the anxious type, security is key, right? We talked about validation, and it's going to be like incredibly helpful for them to be able to know specifically you are here to stay. They're going to need to hear that. They're going to need to hear, I feel good here. This relationship fulfills me. I feel like I made a good choice by choosing you as a partner. Anything that is any language that says, I'm in here, I'm here, I'm with you, that's so important. Those kinds of comments can go like such a long way when it comes to this specific attachment style. And also leaving anything that is any kind of threat out of the picture. That's going to be really critical, because that's a very tender place for a person that presents with an anxious attachment. So people that feel like there's always a perceived threat that a person might leave, when you say, fine, I'm going to go, and you leave, even if you're like leaving for like a day or you're taking a walk, but you don't announce it, you're just out, you're done, you're gone. Or if you say like, I don't want to be in this relationship anymore, but you really don't mean it, and you're just saying that as a way to get the person to do something different, all of those things are actually going to be relationship killers when it comes to someone who is anxiously attached, because it's going to just produce higher levels of anxiety, and it's a strategy that almost never works. And then we have, of course, the avoidant type. And for the avoidant type, being able to offer check-ins about intimacy is going to be really critical. So not just the physical intimacy, right? But of course, the emotional, right? If they confide in you about something, and let's say that they're grieving, and they're grieving an aunt and an unfortunate circumstance, they're grieving, they're like relying upon you as like an emotional cushion in that time, that's going to probably activate their sense of dependency. And that dependency, when it gets kicked up, it's going to make it so that they feel um, like that's entirely too scary, and they may disengage. And then the next day or the next week, you might see them like being a little bit cold or standoffish. But really, what's happening is all the underlying stuff. They present as presumably cold, but really what's happening is that they're self soothing. So it's an important thing to consider that you want to offer the check in when you see that intimacy has been elevated, and outwardly asserting like what you see, right? I see that you confided in me, or you relied upon me to be there for you when you were grieving. I know that discomfort grows in you whenever you feel like there's a closer bond between you and myself, or you and others. And I want to let you know that I see you, I see that, and I want to offer you as much distance as you need to recover. Period. Appreciating a person's independence in that way is so validating for a person that presents with an avoidant type. And so I think just having like some of this general language around how you can approach can be really helpful, or helping a person to have that language towards you can be helpful for you too. So that's my spiel, y'all. Let me get to these questions. Look at y'all engaging with each other. I can relate, Kelly. Hi, Linda. Oh my goodness. It's so good to see people that I've like connected with in the past. Thank you for being here. So my brother recently diagnosed with avoidance attachment disorder. How do I support him? I worry about his solitude. His solitude is soothing to him. So I wouldn't worry too much about that piece. I think validating the solitude and the need for solitude is a great approach. because it's almost like, that experience where, like, even for you, like, I see you, how good that feels when a person sees you and you're like, yeah, you get it. I see you. Like, that feels so good. And it will feel good also for a person that, has that avoidant type, but just that solitude, just know that it may be something that for you feels, depending on the way that you attach and the way that you relate to solitude or alone time or aloneness, it may feel dysregulating. But to someone that presents with an avoidant type, it may feel very soothing, because that is a way that they then create balance in their lives. So I wouldn't necessarily feel bad for your brother. I would more so just acknowledge and validate his need for that. I would love someone to be secure about giving me space like that. Sometimes we just got to train the people that are in our lives to know and learn us. And this is why, like, being in a space like this where you learn a little bit about the approach can be helpful, so that then you can take the nuggets that were applicable to your life and then, write them in like a little notes. I write notes in my phone all the time. Write them in a note. And in that note, whenever you're in a relationship where you want to relay these things, you already have the language that's there for you to be able to then relate to that person. And hopefully that person will, come through in the ways that you need. But sometimes we have to train folks because, not everybody has the language, and it's not anyone's fault, right? It's just that we just kind of haven't been trained to do this, many of us. I think a part of why a lot of relationships tend to fail in this world is because we miss the mark on, like, getting into these nitty-gritty details that can really create like a greater foundation and greater security in relationships. And if we do have them, then, why not make our relationships better? So let's see. Any tips on preoccupied anxious person? From a cognitive behavioral standpoint, to be honest, a lot of what I'm talking about is very cognitive behavioral because it does have more of a mind element, as you know, or may not know, but I operate more so as a holistic psychologist. So a lot of the mechanisms that I employ, like even in like the course that I have coming up, and in the work that I've done in coaching other individuals around emotion-centered work, a lot of that has always had a holistic element implicated in there. So I'll do a lot of the mind-based stuff, which is what I'm covering with all of you now. And then I'll also do the things that are going to help that person to regulate. For example, a person that presents with an anxious type, if fear is so prominent for you that it literally feels like you're about to like implode or explode, then it can be helpful to do some regulatory practices to ground you when you feel like your mind is going to the place where you feel like the person is about to abandon you. So that's the stuff that I tend to do as well, right? Like holistic practices to help ground a person so that then they could make more sound of mind decisions around, approaching their partner. So gosh, there's so many comments. I don't want to miss any like important thoughts here or questions. Is conflict aversion tied to a certain attachment style? Not quite. Like people can be conflict aversive kind of in all of the styles, because conflict aversion is more of a behavioral rather than it's a behavior, and it's a learned behavior. Attachment styles speak a little bit more to temperament. I hope that makes sense. Like it's like temperamentally how you were created from like very early on. Um, Conflict aversion tends to be something that people learn a little bit later in life when they have like actual language around conflict. Gosh, I'm looking at the time. I didn't realize it was so, I was like up on time. Um, yeah, I definitely have an avoidant attachment. So I see that people are like really kind of getting curious. I love it. I love it. I love it. Ego and tone. Yeah. So y'all, I'm hoping that I was able to offer some good perspectives on this. If this is a live that was helpful to you in any way, I'm going to post it as an actual video in a bit. So hopefully you can come back to it as many times as you need. You can share it with a partner, share it with a friend, anybody who you think can really use an attainment of the language around attachment styles and attachment in relation to the people that we love or wish to love or how we wish to be loved. So hopefully that can be, a resource that's there for you in many ways. I'm going to be talking a lot more about these on a more intimate level with individuals in my upcoming course. So if that's something that you're interested in doing, especially if you've suffered from, relationships that have been unhealthy in the past, my course is actually I think pinned on here. So you can always go to that, or it's on my website. But yeah, I hope this was helpful and healing and informative and all the things. And I thank you so much for watching. And yeah, tune into the next tea session this coming Monday. We're going to be covering a new topic, and I can't wait to see you there. Thank you for being here. Bye, everybody. Don't forget to subscribe. Thank you. Thanks, Muffin. Take care, everybody.